Word came out yesterday that Browns quarterback Shedeur Sanders was ticketed for driving 101 miles per hour in a 60 mile per hour zone. Now, look, first thing I'll say is let he who has never crossed the 100 mph barrier cast the first stone. I've done it. I'm sure most of you at some time or another in your life, you have given in to the temptation to see what it feels like to get your car to 100 miles per hour. The speedometer goes to like 250 on some of these cars. It used to stop at 85. You used to peg it at 85, so you didn't know if you were going 100. That was back when the national speed limit was like 50 or 55 miles per hour. I remember it was 50 at one point. Then it went to 55, then it went to 60, 65, and now it's 70 in most places. So, look, I'm not condoning it because I'm assuming that under the right conditions, with no other cars around, straight, for the most part, highway, full control of the vehicle, favorable weather conditions, I got no problem with somebody testing out the gaskets and seeing if it can get to 100 and what it feels like when it gets there. I got no problem with that. They want to come give me a ticket for admitting that at some point in my life I went over 100 miles an hour, I'll pay it and move on. But if you're doing it in like a Rashee Rice setting, more on him in a second, that is irresponsible, that's reckless, and that's wrong. I don't know anything about the circumstances for Shedeur Sanders' 101 mile per hour violation in a 60 mph zone, but I will say this. Of all the incoming rookies in the NFL, he's the last one that should be doing anything that would suggest to anyone he didn't learn his lesson from his free fall to pick number 144 in the draft. If you're going to sell the idea that he's all in, he's fully committed, he's dotting every I, he's crossing every T, he's doing everything necessary to be the best possible version of himself as he can be because he's learned through whatever, whenever, whyever he fell, driving 101 miles per hour and getting caught doing it, that cuts against the vibe that we thought Shedeur Sanders was currently expressing to the world. And again, I'm not going to pass judgment here. I'm just saying to the extent that he feels compelled to project an image other than whatever the image was that caused teams to pass on him, pass on him, pass on him, pass on him all the way to 144, you might cause, through this kind of behavior, some of these other teams to say, yeah, he hasn't changed. Yeah, we were right. We have no regrets. Ultimately, it comes down to how he plays on the field. And this may put even more pressure on him to come in and have a great camp, win the starting job, or at a minimum be number 2 to Joe Flacco if Flacco ends up being the veteran starter. And then when you get your opportunity to play, and don't you feel like at some point this year we're going to see what Shedeur Sanders can do? It's not like the Browns are going to be a wire-to-wire juggernaut, although they could be. But if they're not, at some point, let's see what Dillon Gabriel can do. Let's see what Shedeur Sanders can do. This incident from yesterday will be a footnote. It'll be forgotten. But to the extent that you've got people looking at what happened to Shedeur Sanders and wondering whether or not he has had a wake-up call. He has, and I don't want to say change because, again, it's not a reflection of bad character to drive your car 100 miles an hour. If so, I've got bad character. Now, maybe I do for other reasons, but not because I've driven 100 miles per hour or more under safe conditions on a dry day in a fairly straight stretch of road. That said, it is going to cause people to watch him more carefully, be quicker to judge if he makes mistakes during training camp or says something that ends up being taken out of context or not taken out of context, properly contextualized and criticized for it. So just a little more pressure on Shedeur. And I'm thinking back to the quotes from Deion Sanders when he was on the Asante Samuel podcast. There was no conspiracy against Shedeur. There was no agenda. There was no collusion. Teams are looking for the best players. And as an evaluator from a team that was looking very carefully at quarterbacks told me after the draft, before the draft, I don't trust anything that anyone says because it is a 3D chess match aimed at getting the guys you want. And if that means saying bad things about a guy that you hope slides down into your clutches, so be it. If it means saying good things about someone that you'd like someone who picks in front of you to draft, so be it. After the draft, when the dust settles and you try to figure out what happened, the best way it was put to me, Shedeur Sanders behaved as if he was being recruited, not interviewed. This wasn't any agenda against Dion or Shedeur or anyone. This is a question of how good do we think this player is going to be, and at what point in the draft do we pull the trigger on acquiring him? And for Shedeur Sanders, that moment came at pick number 144. If he wants to use that as motivation to prove that he's far better than where he was picked, that's for him. To the extent that falling that far was any type of an epiphany, I don't know. Does it matter if he was driving 101 miles per hour? I say no. I could just see that some people would look at that and say he didn't learn whatever lesson there was to be learned from falling to pick number 144. I say it's apples and oranges, but I understand perception can be reality. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.